December 12th, 17th, 18th. 2024. Montpelier-Roxbury Public Schools Board of School Directors meeting. We're short a few people, and then I'm going to be leaving early, so it's going to be a little mishmash tonight. But a couple of people are coming soon. But we do have a quorum for those Robert's Rules folks out there. First order of business is public comment. Public comment is when we have opportunity to get feedback from the public on whatever topic they want to bring to our attention. It's a time for us to listen. It's not a time for us to respond. That does not mean that we are not listening closely and processing the information for potential action or just having it inform us and our future actions. So very important part of the night, but I know it can be a little awkward when we don't respond in real time, especially when things are posed in the form of questions. So we have no one in the room, so I'm gonna make a big assumption that we don't have any comments in the room. Anyone online? And I'm not seeing a ton of people online either.
We've got some online, but I don't see anything. Great.
Okay. Yeah, use the raise hand function online if you do want to talk online, but I'm not seeing none. We will move to part 2 of our agenda, which is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a series of items that the board approves kind of en masse. They involve things like approval of the warrants for payroll, minutes from past meetings, etc., that are pro forma and generally do not require discussion. If someone wants to ask questions or feels an item on the consent agenda requires further attention, they can have it removed from the consent agenda, discussed separately. Motion to approve the consent agenda. So second. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Great, and now we're on to the next chapter of our FY26 budget discussion.
Do you want to add the executives?
Oh, yes.
The other
Yeah, we're also, we have an executive session already on the agenda for the purposes of discussing contract of the superintendent. We also want an item to that to discuss our negotiations with the teachers union. That will require a separate motion when we get to it, and a finding that having that discussion in open session would substantially disadvantage the district's negotiating position. So we will add that. We're right now scheduled for 8. So why don't we go ahead and get you started so that way.
Probably should say the consent agenda, but I just wanted to say I continue to be really impressed by the roots and wings that's sent around. Whoever's responsible for that, I think it's such a good document, and feel like it's a lot of good information. I really appreciate you sharing it with us.
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort with the core team, which is the central office leadership team.
Yeah, it's solid.
Thank you. I will pass that on to them. Oh, sorry, that one. Okay, so here's our presentation number 2 for the FY26 budget. And we do have tax rates in here of where we are right now. We're going to state probably, I don't know, 35 times tonight that this situation is not solid in any way, shape, or form. And we are standing, Christina and I, and probably the rest of the superintendents and business managers across the state feel like we're standing on quicksand with this. So we're going to say that over and over again tonight. But we do have the presentation. You'll see there was a couple of requests from last presentation is that the slides from our first presentation are linked at the end of this PowerPoint. So that's where board members can find it. If you need to look back, it's on the last slide in the link. And we will also do we can do an interactive table at the end of this presentation so we can show you what we mean by the quicksand. But it's not part of the slideshow. Okay, so it's something additional. So here we go. So just some reminders up front. I think it's really good just to repeat these reminders every time we show budget presentation pieces. And then Christina will go in with what we know now around expenses, revenue, the capital plan and fund balance and all of that kind of stuff. And in there, she's got the tax rates as well. So just a reminder to the community that our school board's focus for MRPS is the academic achievement for all students. There's safety, inclusion, and belonging for every member of our community. And there's a commitment from the school board to open communication with the community around everything, including the budget. Just a reminder of how education finance currently works in Vermont at this time, December 18th, 2024. Before the legislative session begins in a couple weeks, that Vermont's funding system is a statewide system. We say Vermont is unique all the time. This is actually one instance where we are actually very unique. There are no other state education funding systems like us in the United States. So what that means is every district and supervisory union in the state will receive the funding they ask for that's approved by the voters. So if you ask for it, and you get approved by the voters, you're going to get it. So the education fund has to raise that amount of money in order to pay for every budget in the state. So the money comes out of that one fund. This fund is primarily filled by property taxes, although there are other smaller revenue sources as well. If there's increased spending in other districts, this will influence the Montpelier-Roxbury tax bill. So we have control over our budget, absolutely, and what we choose to spend on. However, we don't have control over anybody else's budget. So the tax rates are set to raise all the money needed to cover the cost of all the approved school budgets. And eventually, all of the budgets do eventually get approved, even in Barry. There are some really good resources out there right now. We'll continue to put these on our slides because they're just good and it's so complicated. So Vermont Public has a great video explaining education finance. And then the Vermont Agency of Education contracted with another group to write as simple worded document as possible. And it took over 50 pages to do so, explaining the education fund. So that's linked in here as well. The next reminder is just our administration's recommended priorities that we want to maintain resources for an effective MTSS model in social emotional learning and academics. In doing so, we want to abide by the MRPS class size policy, the education quality standards, which are set by the State Board of Education, and research-backed guidelines for staffing levels when other guidelines don't exist. We want to allow for professional learning and equitable and inclusive classroom instruction. We need money for that to happen. We want to sustain our safe facilities. We want to ensure the continuation of co-curricular activities for our students. We don't call them extracurricular activities here. We don't consider that kind of thing extra. We consider it part of the educational experience. So they're co-curriculars. We want to develop a budget that's fiscally responsible for our taxpayers. That means we may need to explore all systems for our efficiencies, and we want to ensure financial coherence across the buildings, that it makes sense in each of our buildings. And finally, we want to protect the services dedicated to our most vulnerable children and families. So oftentimes we are the last hope for those kind of services here in the school district. Oops, sorry. So our budget unknowns, and Christina, jump right in here. The tax factors. We have received two different versions thus far on our long-term weighted average daily membership. That's what LTWADM stands for. Those are our weighted pupils, formerly known as equalized pupils. We've received two. We knew the first one was wrong. The Agency of Education knew the first one was wrong, and they gave it to us anyway. we suspect that this second round is also wrong. However, ours is not as wrong as possibly other districts. To give you a sense, Barry's student LTW ADM went up by nearly 1,000 students in the second count, which is simply not possible. So we're not sure what's going on there. Colchester's went up by quite a bit the first round and went down by quite a bit the second round. So there's still something not right with how they're calculating the LTW ADM. We do have the current figure that the Agency of Education has given us because ours says we went up by 32 students, which seems plausible with our student, what we see from our student count. So even if ours is wrong, it's not drastically wrong. And we can show you later that the LTW ADM, while it influences the tax rate, it's not a huge influence over the tax rate. So a student here or there is not going to truly affect us that much. The property dollar yield is not voted as a law until May or very early June. The dollar yield is the biggest flux here right now that we'll show you with the interactive chart. And we can explain that later. That comes out in the December 1 letter. However, much like last year, everybody is predicting that that's going to be in flux throughout the legislative session and budget season. Our cent discount, I thought we knew that one.
Adjustment, so I just want to hear a final word on that.
She's
Before,
looking at our statewide person at the table.
well,
Okay.
Jake might have something to say about that too.
Okay.
It just that it went up a cent, so I'm a little cautious.
Right. Still not truly understanding why. And then the common level of appraisal should be set-ish. Very close. Very close. So maybe that's a dotted line across the CLA. In terms of revenues, we haven't gotten our EEE grant, which is pre-K, our transportation aid, but we do know our prior year surplus allocation because we're getting closer to the audit being completed, correct?
That and at the last meeting, the board kind of gave me a nod that 400,000 seems like a good placeholder for now.
Our expenses that are unknown, we're in negotiations with both the MREA, which is the teachers union, and the MRESSA, which is the instructional assistant union. That is ongoing, and we don't know our career center 6 semester average yet.
Just got an email on that this evening, so.
This evening.
Yes, in
Okay.
round 3, we will have that information.
Okay. So several things that are still up in the air. So here, maybe it's you or Anna. Give a blocker. Okay, so you wanna do this?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So this has more information from the last time I met with you. I'm gonna walk through the tax rate estimates. As Libby was saying, there are 3 or 4.
Yeah, you can turn it off. Just turn it off. It's the bot. You can move that mic over to Christine. You just turn it off, Tim.
Sorry.
All right, so we'll walk through the tax rate estimates. And overall, the budget in this presentation has decreased by 0.08% from the version that I shared with you 2 weeks ago. So starting with the total budget, that's decreased 0.08, and I'll get into those expenses in just a moment. The non-tax revenues have decreased a little over 4%, increasing our education spending by 7.99%. As Libby said, our long-term weighted average daily membership has increased by 32. And once we factor in the current property dollar yield, which is 8,553, and the 11-cent reduction in our tax rate. So that gives Montpelier a tax rate of $1.26, which is a 1.62% decrease from this current year. And that leaves Roxbury with a 6.44% decrease in your tax rate. And I do believe all these numbers will change by the time you vote on your budget in January. In this version, I've included the non-residential tax rate. So that affects our businesses, second homes, rental properties.
But what we do doesn't influence this rate. This is
That's
set by
correct.
the
Our
state.
budget doesn't. Going on to the next slide. So now I'll just go over the changes in expenses. There's only 2 areas that we changed since the last time I met with you. And the expenses by program. So the first change from the last version is in general education. We just made a correction to an FTE in general ed. And the other change that you'll see on this sheet is buildings and grounds. We have currently decreased 1.0 FTE in the custodial supervisor position through attrition. And if there's any questions. So this is an overall decrease of, again, 0.08% from version 1. The next few slides just show the expenses by category and pie charts associated. The breakdown of salaries, we've included that chart again.
Where are you?
Oh,
Okay.
Breakdown of salaries. Yeah, this is, all right, so the next change is on revenues, and that's just a small change in the education spending grant that decreased based on the decrease that we made through staffing. Otherwise, everything else has stayed the same.
Didn't understand this at the last meeting, but the actuals that are connected to the local revenue line, that's 25,000. That's what's expected to come in for the whole year, or what's come in to this point? Is that, and that's for the Roxbury enrichment, the Bridges Enrichment Program in Roxbury, or is that for something different?
So the after-school revenue is a combination of the program at Main Street and the Roxbury program.
The middle school.
So, and the 25,000 is what's expected by the end of the year? Or is that,
So the actuals at FY20, the only actuals on here are FY24. So what we know of last year.
so we don't know what is expected to come in this year?
No, I've just done an estimate of what we've received to date in order to gauge what I'm going to budget for next year.
You've estimated that we're going to receive $80,000?
Sorry.
No.
No, that's an $80,000 decrease from what we budgeted in the current year. When we budgeted last year for FY25, we anticipated a lot more revenue being generated. And what we're seeing this current year is a decrease on what we were estimating last year, not knowing how the program was going to run when we were going through the budget cycle. It was hard to gauge last year how that was going to operate.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Skipped that part. Nothing has changed on the capital plan since I last reported. I guess I would just highlight, we are anticipating a $270,000 transfer again next year if the board sees it. Because we have depleted it this year with the replacement of the cafeteria roof at the high school. And the next slide is the fund balance slide. Again, I just plugged in the $400,000 as a placeholder here. That is up for discussion at any point. Now we're on to the fun part, the interactive spreadsheet.
So.
Something better.
I'm actually, is it all right if I take away FY25 there and then make it bigger for the board? Since you don't have this in front of you. There we go.
Hey, Libby, let me just double check. This is the same table that's on slide 8 of the presentation, but this is the Excel table and we can tinker with it.
We can tinker with it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so one of the reasons why this was, I thought, a good exercise when I think Mia suggested it last board meeting was this is the exact table that you see on, in the slideshow. And one of the things that superintendents and business managers around the state are worried about right now is that the dollar yield was not set, using actuals, which is not set any year using actuals, quite honestly, but because of the situation that school districts found themselves in last year and the continued volatility of how education funding is happening and everything that's swirling around us again. When the tax department receives our estimates for this number right here, I don't know if you can see for the education spending percentage increase. We certainly gave them a lower number than 7.99% because we're asked at such an early stage in the game that it's just an estimate. From what I understand from other superintendents and business managers, they also gave the Agency of Education and Tax Department lower percentages there than what is actually coming through. So if the tax department uses those numbers, and Jake, jump in if I say anything wrong here. If the tax department uses those estimates to make the dollar yield, should have brought like a laser pointer here or something, which is this number right here that is tentatively set, then if we've estimated too low across the board, then they've set the dollar yield too high. And they won't, in return, the worry we are all having inside school districts is that then we don't collect enough revenue for the education fund to pay for the bills that are going to come due. And so the tax department will have to decrease the dollar yield in order to raise more revenue through taxes. Did I say any of that wrong? I just want to stop and make sure.
No, it all sounds good. I mean, it's not the tax department doing this, it's like
The JFO and
Yeah.
a collaborative effort.
collaborative.
I don't mean to lay blame at our colleagues at the tax department in any way, shape, or form. It's just the way our system has operated for a long time. And up until last year, it relatively worked. The dollar yield didn't change too much from my first 5 years as superintendent. And you've been a business manager for a long time.
Years, I only ever saw it go up or down 100, 200.
Yeah, so it worked until now. And now it may not be. So if you everybody watch the tax rates down here for Montpelier and Roxbury.
Do you want me to do it?
You want to do it?
Yeah.
So if Christina takes the dollar yield and decreases it by $500, which is not out of the realm of possibility, I think. We can decrease that dollar yield by $500 automatically without the school board or the administration touching anything. We're at a near 5% increase in Montpelier. Roxbury is still looking at a decrease, but a very small one. So $500 really is in the realm of possibility, where this is why I say I feel like we're standing on quicksand right now, because we haven't done anything, right? And 500 is not a lot of money. If she continues to go down just by, another 100, just so you can see what happens. Montpelier is now over a 5% tax rate with 6.31. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay.
Did you already talk about if you're confident in our long-term weighted ADM count?
Yeah, we can say that once again, because I think it's important. No, we're not confident in that. We got our second number 2 days ago. Jody, our second number 2 days ago. So our first number was, we increased by 40 LTW ADM. Our second number, we increased by 32. Barry's second number is that they increased almost by 1,000. Just by that alone, and other school districts that had huge swings between the first run and the second run, tells us it's probably not solid.
Okay.
We knew the first one was wrong because they used the wrong numbers to calculate it.
Can you remind us when it gets solid?
I'd love to remind you when it gets solid.
Historically, it's been in December, but
Okay,
that keeps getting advanced out.
I see.
or
Okay.
Pushed out, so.
But if Christina bring the dollar yield back to where it is now,
And then I think Tim had a question.
Yeah, and I just want to show you that the LTW ADM doesn't, so decrease our LTW by 50. That doesn't impact our tax bracket as much.
Yeah.
Right, or our tax percentage as much as the dollar yield does. So there's room to maneuver. And like I said before, based on what Christina can see from our October 1st student counts, and what their categories and identifiers are, she doesn't think ours are that messed up.
No, we did have an increase in the ELL weighting, so I feel pretty confident in that. I just think maybe this is too much of an increase.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I think I just wanted to confirm my understanding that you think just generally, given the numbers of students from October 1st, 32 is maybe not 100% accurate, but in the realm.
Ours isn't, the Barry superintendent is like literally like, what are they counting? Like,
Right.
I have no idea how they got these numbers. But based on our numbers, it's in the land of possibility that we're close to that.
And you're not feeling it's like specifically one way or the other. It could be higher, it could be lower, or
It's probably lower,
probably lower.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
but not by a lot.
Okay. And that's not going to have a substantial effect. You don't, okay. Just trying to figure out. how
No,
to think
not
about
for
this.
us, because it wouldn't be that far off, right? I mean, there's other school districts that are like, I don't know what to show my community right now, because this
Right.
can't be right. And we're not in that position for the LTW ADM.
Thanks.
The cells that are highlighted in yellow, is that because they are likely to or almost definitely gonna change?
Oh, even the cent reduction?
Well, I'm just not sure. I haven't gotten the final word on that, so
Okay.
I'm leaving it in yellow
Okay.
until I have it in writing.
What was the cent reduction last year?
Last year was 10 cents and it was supposed to go to 8 cents this year, but then they adjusted it by the statewide adjustment. And I'm not sure if that's going to change. I'm not sure.
Not much. So it would be like, take 8 cents and divide it by 72%, and that's what it would be.
Okay, so
So we could take the yellow off of the cent reduction.
could that change with the legislative session though? No.
I mean,
That's
who knows this year?
That's when
but-
they implemented it last year, so I feel like that could still, they might.
Yeah, I think probably not for FY 26, possible for future years, something might get changed, but unlikely for FY 26.
Thank you.
Is that one that is gonna have a big impact? It seems like it wouldn't. And it sounds like if it's gonna change, it wouldn't change by very much, probably. Okay, so.
We can do that. then.
And the final dollar yield is set in like June.
Late May, early June. It's one of the last bills that goes out.
So may I ask a suggestion for, or an initial tinker? If the property dollar yield goes down by 500 and the tax rate goes up to 5.9 in Montpelier, what would be necessary to cut to get a 2% decrease in the tax rate? What would be the overall reduction in our budget to achieve a 3% increase in Montpelier as opposed to a 6% increase in Montpelier?
So we can play around with that a little bit. So there's a $600 decrease in the dollar yield, which puts the Montpelier tax rate at 6.31. Then Christina, you
I'm
wanna,
gonna take drive.
yeah,
This isn't very magical math, so just bear with me. It's
my
simply
guess
just-
would be it's around 2 million. Or a million. What did you just decrease it by?
You said a 2% tax increase?
Well, maybe it's to get the tax rate in Montpelier to 3%, from 6% to 3%, how much would we have to cut if the dollar yield was that number?
So what you're
Just as
looking
a
at,
sort of a sense, just to
Yep.
sort of get us an idea of what kind of cuts might be in store to get to 3%. Not that I think that 6% would necessarily fail, but certainly. we would
It's a
wanna-
great question, Brett. It was a great question.
What we're trying to do right now, yeah.
So I just decreased the general budget by $1 million and we decreased the yield by 600. And that gets Montpelier to a tax rate of 2.17
If we decrease by $1 million,
and the yield.
What raising the yield again?
$600. So that yield
It's huge.
is huge, yeah. And $1 million, as we learned last year, is not an easy number to get to.
And what's,
Yeah.
I mean, what's the latest we think this will be settled? I mean, is this gonna be settled by January 22nd? And if it's not, then what happens? I mean, what happens?
So if I recall last year, sitting in the chamber in House Ways and Means with Jake, looking at the ed fund outlook, and pointing to the dollar and saying, hey, Jake, that's not what we have. And so it fluctuates throughout the session. Or we'll be able to see throughout the session, throughout January. But it very well may be that the board is sending a budget to the voter, warning a budget January 22nd or whenever we do. And what we have presented and you have agreed to send to the voters is not going to be accurate. And we can't do anything about it. Because the session starts January 3rd or something like that.
I think it's January 8th, maybe.
Yeah. Jake, would you add anything on there?
I mean, that's always the case, isn't it?
Yeah, that is always, you were
It is-
100%, you're right.
It is always the case, but it seems like given the volatility with recent changes that historically what we've gone on with assumptions by, the January date we have to approve it is,
Maybe it looks.
yeah, it's generally on the same street as what it ends up being. And here it sounds like it might be like in a different like region of the country by the time we get to
Yeah,
It's tricky this year.
yeah.
it is, there's, and it's a chicken and an egg kind of thing, like, the tax department and GFO gets these low ed spending numbers, so the yield isn't set too high. And then people respond to that by spending more. They
Yeah.
think, oh, we have capacity. And then the situation gets even worse.
Right.
So. But what happens is like the districts start sending. AOE much more solid numbers in February and March, and then. Everything gets updated, but that's long after budgets have been warned.
I believe the business managers requested to the Agency of Education on Friday in their meeting that they're gonna wanna start collecting preliminary numbers prior to budgets being warned. To maybe help the work out on the finance side of the system over there.
What, are we still operating on a level funded, but generally a level funded budget, or does this reflect some degree of trying to find like a certain level of cuts?
This is generally a level funded budget. Thank you for that reminder. I didn't say that clearly before. Through attrition, we are reducing one non-licensed administrative position. Because we had a resignation. So, that is the only real person change or people change in this budget. The building level administrators also, decreased the budget by, I think.
Right.
20,000, they didn't decrease their budgets by a lot, but they did decrease there a little bit as well. Thoughts, guidance? What would the
Yeah.
board like to see in January?
Where does the 400,000, where does that fall in here? That on tax revenues or something?
Yes, that falls under non-tax
The pull from
revenues.
the fund balance?
Yes, so you could increase or decrease that. Currently, you're seeing a decrease in non-tax revenues because we lost, well, we didn't look. We used up some fund balance in our IDEA grants and that special education federal funds. So using up that fund balance, now we had to move those positions into the general fund.
That's
Still special education, but in the general ed, or the general fund.
I mean, I'm personally, I'm impressed with what you all have done, and at this point, like, there's really nothing more until we have more information about things we have no control over.
kind of how I feel as well.
Yeah.
But it's worth the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really hard, obviously, the challenge you guys are facing operating on quicksand, not knowing how solid any of these numbers, but let's take it at face value that it's a 1.62% decrease. I would be interested in reducing the amount of fund balance that we're putting towards the budget. It seems like it's kind of buying down the rate a little bit. And in a year where, again, operating on the assumption that all of this is correct, right?
Solid.
In a year where we're looking at a decrease for both towns, I would be very interested because it will just set us up for a better future if we're not pulling from the fund balance. And I don't know if this is the right time to have a capital fund conversation, but I know there are a lot of capital needs, and it seems like the capital budget in this is sort of working towards the funding level of about 270 or 300 as it's going over the next couple of years. So I'd be interested in thinking about maybe moving some of our fund balance into the capital fund and really kind of thinking about how we could maybe advance some of, like your story last spring about the windows that can't open in MSMS. I feel that, again, operating on the notion that this is all accurate, I feel that there may be an opportunity to have a couple of those conversations, and maybe they don't all need to be in the budget, but can you, what do you think about that? Do you see opportunity there? Do other board members see value in that?
I totally agree. I think the fund, our use of fund balance is one thing we do have control over, and it's super flexible because, we don't even need to report our actual education spending that our tax rates are based off of the AOE until like May. So we can target some tax rate and respond to what the legislature does and use the fund balance strategically, whether it's for capital improvements or if we have to buy down tax rates, we can use it that way, but hopefully we don't. So I totally agree.
And those are decisions that we make in May, right? Those are not decisions that we need to make in time for the budget to be voted on, right? Because we can change what we allocate from the fund balance.
Well, the budget is one thing, and that's locked up, but the ed spending that affects tax rates is another thing.
Yeah.
I think what I hear Tim, you saying, and correct me if I'm not accurate, is to take some or all of the fund balance contribution out of the revenue, out of the non-tax revenue, because where we stand right now
Pretty nice.
is a decrease in tax rates in both towns. And if we need to put some of that money back in, we certainly can't. You have January to react and do that. If we don't, then after budget season is over and we have a warned and approved budget, then the board can and should have a conversation of how to use the fund balance to bulk up that capital fund piece a little bit, because we did use it. It's basically depleted at the moment, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah.
So what did you just do, Christina?
Oh.
You were reducing non-tax revenues, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you changed it back.
400,000, just to see what,
Mhm.
so if you decreased the non-tax revenues, the 400,000 from your fund balance, then it'd be a decrease in Montpelier by 0.08. And in Roxbury, a
Uh-huh.
decrease of 4.96.
So that would be not pulling anything from the fund balance. But if you left that number the same, the non-tax revenues, and you increased capital plan to 670,000, the same thing would happen, right? We're just putting the 400,000 in a different place.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That wouldn't be, you wouldn't want to lock yourself into that decision now.
No, I understand it.
Yeah.
And we were trying to see if we needed to warn the capital fund contribution separately. Do you have an answer on that yet?
I don't yet. I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Next meeting. Thank you.
The reason I'm asking is if we wanted to do something after landing the budget, but we already told the voters we were gonna put 270 into the capital plan. I don't know if we can say, oh, no, just kidding, it's 350 now, or maybe we can. I don't know.
You can talk about how to use your fund balance and,
Got it.
you can hold it as part of the capital plan.
Yeah, you
Right.
could make that decision at any point. if you wanna move
Okay,
it
yeah,
here.
okay.
For certain projects, like you allocate money for the track and the net zero, you can allocate for other projects.
It would be the same thing as that.
Yes.
Just got it. Okay. Mhm.
And to the extent it would be useful to volunteer Jake and Scott. I think in the finance committee, we'd be happy to look at, things, those types of questions. And, if folks had specific questions, we could kind of study a little bit more too and come back with ideas or thoughts for how we do it. It just seems like there may be an opportunity here. Again, assuming all things.
Yeah, yeah,
You're starting to sound like us too. Soon.
yeah. I guess I have a question. I'm, Brett, you said this already, which is, let's say the dollar yield goes down $600, which sends taxes in Montpelier up by 6% and Roxbury basically even. That might be something that a budget that would still pass, but if not, and if we felt like we needed to. I am curious to know whether or not, I don't know what slide this is on anymore, but the priorities that we're following in order to set this budget. Whether or not $1 million cuts, actually, we can still meet those priorities, like our systems and our co-curriculars and that.
Yes, we can. So the the administration has a priority list that should we need to access it. What is it, kind of the red phone or whatever, should we need to access it, we can, and while we haven't actually done the actuals for adding it up just yet on that list, I'm looking at Christina to see if she did today, but we would be close to approximately $1 million. It would not touch our multi-tiered system of support. It would not touch our supports for our vulnerable families. It would not touch our co-curricular program offerings.
Okay.
It essentially is the bullet point of abiding by our class size policy in a better way and looking at our system for efficiencies.
Mhm.
But the dollar yield, we won't find that out until long after we've already voted on a budget.
We could find out fluctuations between now and then.
Right, we might get updates. We just won't get a final.
So when do we have to warn our budget, Jen?
January 22nd.
And so
It's like in a month.
if you had to guess how many updates in the dollar yield are we gonna get between now and when we vote on our budget?
So
Might as well.
You get one.
We got one.
For there's gonna be a new consensus, forecast for all the non-property tax revenues that the state receives, and like a lot of those go to the ed fund. And then once the joint fiscal office gets that, they will update the yield.
So it seems like that's that's our last opportunity to make change based on the information that we have.
That would be very close to January 22nd. I don't know if we'll have time, but yeah.
I mean, it's a really tricky situation that boards and admin across the state find ourselves in. It is what it is, and we're not alone. I think the piece that perhaps the board could focus in on is the number of, like, the education spending. You know, we're up nearly 8% in education spending. Because that's what the board has control over, and that's it.
I hesitate to ask this too, so I don't want to, might be a tough one to answer, but if we can cut $1 million without affecting our programming, what's the argument against doing that?
My argument would be that,
Especially for a heavily taxed community.
I know for a fact that, Montpelier and Roxbury love their staff and faculty, and they do awesome work for kids. And that those cuts would drastically impact our staff and faculty.
It's a personnel issue. Sorry.
I do think that we should take more advantage if attrition shows its face through natural attrition, retirement, moving elsewhere. And we can take advantage of it monetarily. When I say that, that's what I mean. We should, and we will. And so the cut that the reduction that is in this particular budget was not a planned reduction. It was an idea, but it was not a planned reduction. But because of the resignation we received, it became plausible quickly.
That's a creative way to go about it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Is there some assumption that obviously not having specific information about a person, but like, do you have a trend over the years about attrition that you could sort of plug X number of folks we would expect in any given year to retire?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Retirements change a lot year to year. Typically, we have 1 to 4. Looking at, we have, you know, a list of teachers and their seniority and all of that kind of good stuff. And looking at that list, I don't know if many are ready to take that move for themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes teachers are trumpeting it, you know, because they've worked for a long time and they're ready to retire and they want to celebrate that fact and they let us know. And sometimes they don't they're not ready to make that move. And I would say that our professionals who are at that stage of life are mainly not ready to make that move this year. We're not even offering a retirement buyout this year because we didn't see anybody who would be able to take it. We do have people who can retire if they wanted to, and they don't want to, you know,
But the buyout wouldn't
influence them because they're already eligible. Yeah. So Christine and I didn't think it was worthwhile to offer that to our teaching staff, or AFSCME or IAs. So we just didn't think we'd get any takers in talking to their leadership. We typically, Tim, just to go back to your question, probably have a turnover of maybe 10, maybe 15 teachers. We do not have a high level of turnover each year in this district. So when I was curriculum director in Franklin Northwest, which is now Missisquoi, I would stand in front of probably 50 to 60 new teachers every year. They're a bigger district, but we're nowhere near that here in this district. So, and often people who leave are leaving the state to be closer to family or something like that. So
in the aggregate though, it's like, say, if the average is like 10, would it be reasonable to assume that 9 would come, you would need to fill 9?
Yeah,
or something? 'Cause for budgeting purposes with a good fund balance to back you up, it seems like that might be
yeah, the attrition has to work for us, right?
Right.
So for instance, if one of our first grade teachers decided to leave, we still need a first grade teacher, you know? If one of our math teachers decided to leave here at Montpelier High School, our class size says that we need another math teacher.
Sure.
So that wouldn't work for us, but there are places that attrition may work for us to our advantage monetarily. And I think we just have to be really smart about that
Yeah.
as we move forward.
We had also said we would open up a second public comment. Obviously, there's nobody in the room from the public, but I just wanted to check and see if there's anybody online who
Yep.
had questions as we've been going through this, or maybe something.
Yeah, are we ready to do that?
I just appreciate your question, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that you raised that, because that's about the $400,000, just like, that's a really good piece of information. I agree that, like, if things, you know, stay stable, then that would be a smart move to do something.
Yeah, no, I agree as well.
$100,000 like 40 windows.
Were they 10?
Is it like 40 or like 4?
Have you seen the size of our windows?
I think it's only 10,000, but they got more.
No, I think it's a little more than that.
Yeah. I think it might be closer to 4 than 40.
Windows.
Do you have anyone online who? Not seeing a firestorm of hands.
No.
Starting away.
Well, we can move on if we don't. So I know Jody has a busy night.
Did you grab something to eat, Jody?
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Jody Emerson is going to present the Central Vermont Career Center board, and I also want to thank Scott for being our representative on that board. It's nothing like double the fun for school board service, so thank you. Yeah.
Are you gonna project that, Libby?
Yeah, I'm getting it up right now. Give me 1 second. It's
No problem.
gonna be a PDF, but I think we can make it
Yeah.
work.
It's a Canva. I could share that with you if that works better.
Um,
Can you zoom in at all? Oh, yeah. Great.
make it fit the page here. I think you shared it with me another way, but this is the quickest way to get it. So we're good.
I didn't change costume from the Harwood presentation for anyone out there who's watching both.
Watch it both.
Thank you for having me. Jody Emerson, Superintendent Director of the Central Vermont Career Center. We did change up the pictures and background of this presentation, but anyone who's been here before, this is going to sound very similar. A lot of the same things. The CVCC school district mission has not changed, so that remains the same. Basically getting our kids ready for the workforce and for participating in society in the future. Our goals are the same ones that we had last year when we came. And so we still have the long-term planning goal of by FY29, opening the doors to a new center. Right now, that looks like a standalone center that could potentially live in Barrytown. It could change because there are lots of potential changes in our legislature this year. There's quite a lot that could happen. There's a lot that could happen with CTE. And so while we're moving forward with an option on some land, we will have opt-out capacity so that we can flex with those changes and do what we need to do. Yeah.
For folks who aren't familiar with the potential CTE change, can you just say like a brief, like what might happen statewide?
And what CTE stands for?
Career and technical education. That's the easier one. In March of 23, the group that is consultants that are working with the AOE now as part of the Listen and Learn work did a study on CTE governance and funding, and they released a report and then a one-pager with 10 recommendations, the biggest of which was a shift in governance and a shift in funding. CTE directors for a long time have been asking for non-competitive funding so that we're not competing with you. We're still asking for that. I'm not sure that that's going to come out of this, although I still hope it would. What it sounds like there might be a recommendation for is a 1 or 3 CTE districts for the state. So right now we have 17 centers. We have 4 independent districts like mine. We have, just making sure I get my count right, 13 or 12 that are hosted by a school district, similar to what we were when we were with Berry Unified Union School District. And we have 2 that are comprehensive high schools that are private. And so there's lots of variation amongst those. There's full day centers, which means you have 4 hours of programming each day. There's half day centers, which means they have 2-hour programming and they rotate between a first year and a second year's program. So students are there for 2 years in the same program, or some of our centers across the state are full day with academics, some are not. So there's such wide variation and huge inequities as a result of that. So the study was very clear that there needs to be a change, and it also was something that talked about economies of scale statewide as far as education. And so I think that's why they haven't released a recommendation yet, and they continue to work on that and looking at education as a whole in Vermont. So we'll see. The report was supposed to come out in November with recommendations, then this month. And last week I was on a call that basically said it's coming in the future, but we're not going to give you a date now. So who knows what's going to happen with that, Scott, but we could become 1 CTE district statewide. And of course that would shift things. So while we're moving forward, because we believe it's the right thing to do, we also know that there are lots of things that could change along the way. The other goals are around education quality, always improving our programs. One of the expectations, some of our funding that we get that's not included in our local budget is Perkins grant. Perkins 5 is federal funding. And basically the way that CTE centers are assessed is by the Perkins grant. So every 2 years we do a comprehensive local needs assessment, which is similar to the NEASC study that regular schools do every 10 years. We just do it every 2. And in that, we look at our programming, we look at our accountability measures that we get each year from the state. We look at labor market detail, and we try to figure out from industry partners and surveys, what do we need to do? Where are we supposed to grow? What changes do we need to make? Why did I say that? Oh yeah, because this year, instead of having a requirement of 1 industry recognized credential or 3 college credits for each of our junior senior programs, it upped. So we need more than 1 IRC, 6 college credits, or a combination of an IRC and 3 college credits in every program. So this ups the level of expectations for our students as well, because this is the data, some of the data that we're held accountable for. So that's one of the reasons we have that educational quality piece on there. And the third goal is community engagement. And one of the ways we've tried to engage more community members this year is by moving our board meetings around. So we held our November board meeting at Washington Central, our December board meeting at Harwood. Next month, we get to host it here and see if we get more people. So maybe if you have I don't think you, nope, we're good. Keep going. So the charge has been and continues to be that I work to develop and implement a full day education program that integrates the academics and courseworks into the programming that we have and into the interests of our students. So if we're looking at math, science, literacy, history, it needs to be related and authentic to what they're interested in, what they're studying with us, and ways for them to build upon their understanding. Also, to increase access, today we closed our first round admissions at 3 o'clock today, and we had a total of 334 applicants in first round. We have 3 rounds of that. Last year, we had a total of 299 in first round, the year before 269 in first round, the year before 248 in first round, the year before that was 222 in first round. So continuously increasing. It's really exciting to see those numbers, and it's really scary. Because I know right now, sitting here in front of you, that 60 of those students aren't going to get in. And that's a hard thing to swallow. to know that students want that access and we don't have the seats for them. Some of them, it's because 40 kids want to get into electrical. We can take 16.
That's really good.
It is really good. It's an area where we should duplicate. We should have another program so that we can get more students up and running for that. Other programs have lesser amounts, so it's a matter of trying to find the fit, and looking at planning ahead to what do we build up to get to that new building. If we were to get that in FY29, we were going to increase programming every year, and next year was going to be human services, bringing back childcare because there's a need for that. And also a 9th grade foundations program to start building skills so that students have better access and success in our programming moving forward. And we're just not doing that this year, which it's counterintuitive in a way to know that we keep increasing the number of students that are interested in coming and we're not opening up more spots next year. But this fiscal year doesn't seem like that's a good idea for us to do, knowing it also impacts all of you, our sending schools. So I've already kind of talked about the why, that we're looking to address the capacity issues. We want to improve the access of our students. We've heard over and over, and I still need to find this data and get a better grip on it, that there are a lot of our students that are not going back to their sending school and accessing their programming there. I think there's less this year. We don't have a parking lot for our students, so they have to use the buses provided by sending schools. So that sort of forces them at least back on campus. So that may be helping. So I'd be curious to see what that data says. But we did lose our student parking this year, which has been difficult for some students to appreciate. And we, again, continue to work harder to make sure that our students are ready for the workforce when they go out. Our mission statement for the center is very much similar to that of the district. It's just by sharing that here, I get another opportunity to share another picture of our students. So this is our EMS 1 program in there. Much like Libby and her counterparts do, we're looking at our budget all year round. We're thinking about different pieces. When my teachers come in August, we meet in September, we have goal setting and budget discussions right then. What are the equipment pieces that they're going to need? For instance, automotive needs a brake lathe for next year. It's a couple years past when we should have replaced it, but it was okay before. Next year, it's not going to make it another year. So that's a $20,000 piece of equipment. So a little bit different supplies for our programs than what's in your classrooms. But those are the sort of things we talk to our teachers about. What are the things you absolutely need? Where are they on that supply list? Because we look at the depreciating value and when is it supposed to be replaced? And then what other things are you hoping to get, kind of the wish list? And often that's how we set up the director's budget. We take every single wish list item and put it on there. That would have been a 25% increase. We never bring that one forward to the boards with the expectation that we're going to go forward with that one. But then we start really looking at the data as it comes in, and ours is different. We don't have the long-term weighted thing that you have. Instead, we have a base education rate, and you can probably move forward. Oh, so when we presented first to the board a level services, which was a 9% increase with no change in the base education rate. So we just presumed it was the same as this year. It's always increased in the past, but we just took it for what it was last year and just put it in there. And it would have been a 9% increase with the healthcare increases, knowing that we're in a negotiations year that's sort of unpredictable, and looking at our liability insurances as well. Then we got the base education rate, which decreased this year. First time ever that we're aware of. It went down 3%. What that impacts is the on behalf payment directly from the Ed Fund to the CTE Center. So that is decreased. It also decreases the state tuition reduction for CTE centers, which means it increases the direct billed CTE invoice to you all for your tuition students, because the portion that doesn't come from the on behalf payment, we bill directly to our sending schools. So it ended up being an 11% increase as a result of that, with a 9% increase in tuition and a 28% increase in what's billed to you. Last year, your tuition was $7,536 for this current fiscal year. Next year, it's projected at $9,717. Our increases are a little like not the same as yours because our budget is 4.6 million this year. It's like a 5.1 next year. So it's when we're saying these increases, percent increase, it's not as huge as a $30 million budget or $50 million budget that some of our sending schools have. But it still matters that we talk about that so you understand where that's coming from. So when we initially had given that 9%, the board said you can go up to 15%. Tell us what that would look like. When we got that change in the base education rate, we didn't do that. We brought the 10.8%, which was the level services, the 12 and 13.3 increases to the board. That was last week. And the board unanimously said, let's stick with the level services and see what happens. What I can say is now that we have our first round information in our application data, next month, the board may make some programming decisions. There's two programs that have been under enrolled. One of them is paused this year, and we may choose not to open that program. And so that could also decrease the amount of our budget. So it's at the highest it could be, pending no other changes. For right now, it could go down. It won't go up, at least not because we've done something to make it go up. I think you all understand that based on the conversation I heard here. So this is just a repeat kind of the things that are happening. We have very specific class size expectations. So our programs, most of them have a cap of 16 students per one instructor. If we add students, we need either a lab assistant or an additional instructor. So there will be a slide that comes up that has counts on it, and I'll explain where those extra numbers are coming in. The base education rate went down for us, a 3.1% increase, which impacted everything that I've already shared. Health insurance, has gone up 11.9. Our liability insurances are projected to go up somewhere between 4 and 7%, and we're in a negotiations year. We get to base our tuition off of 6 semester average. So it's not the actual students we have, just like yours isn't the actual students you have. It's just a different variation of that. The reason that they've had the 6 semester average set is so that there's not wild swings in the amount of tuition that's charged to you or the number of students you have. Kind of tries to level that out. As you can see, based on the applications we have and the number of students we've been able to accept, we have a continuing climb. Right now, I have 217 students enrolled, and we're billing at 184 this year because that is what our 6 semester average is. We projected the 6 semester average to be 194 for next year. We got the number today. It's 193.18, so pretty close. One other thing that I didn't say when I was talking about that tuition increase, we did at the end of every year, they do an audit of tuition, and we're told what our allowable tuition is. And so if we overcharge, then we have to send money back. And if we undercharge, we can bill for more. So we overcharged by about $500 per FTE last year. And so we'll credit that onto the amount. So that will bring down that piece a little bit going into next year. I think my business manager emailed everyone this week about that. So this one talks about how many students are in program and then capacity. So in automotive right now, we have 16 students. We do have a capacity of 21 if we have 5 co-op students and we have a lab assistant in when there are co-op students there. So you can see that building trades has 20. That means we have the 16 in the program plus 4 co-op. And that's true also for electrical. We have the 16 plus 5 co-op. Exploratory, we have 2 teachers for that program. That's our 9th and 10th grade program. And so they split the kids during the day. So they have 24. Our digital media arts graphic design class is basically decided by the capacity of the classroom space and the number of setups we have of computers. So some pretty high-end Macs in there. So we have 20. So sizes are set by different pieces. Our medical professions program is going to be able to expand next year because they're letting go of the phlebotomy and not having to do 30 live draws for each student means that there's less of that to supervise for the instructor. So she's going to expand and do an anatomy and physiology. So they're going to get 8 credits over the 6, and they're going to drop the CPT, but they're going to continue with the certified medical assistant criteria. So they'll have an IRC plus 8 credits next year instead of 2 IRCs and 6 credits. So we did that shift. We can get 2 more students into the program. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about as we build our budget and look at programming. So that's our anticipated tuition. We will set that for sure on January 15th, and we'll send out to every district what that will be based on what our board decides on January 13th when they're here meeting next month. We put these in just to show you kind of the 70% of our budget is in salary and benefits. And so that's pretty traditional, 70 to 85% of your budgets go into that. And then the next one talks about just the other pieces of the budget. So salaries, benefits, but the contracted services, we pay a facilities use fee to the Barry district. We have supplies, obviously. So those are the sort of things that are going into our budget in case you're wondering what areas are. So we do have some adult students in our programming. We are only allowed to charge 40% of our tuition for adult students, and they can only have seats if there are seats available in a program. And then the Voc Ed support grant is that money that comes directly off the ed fund that I was talking about earlier. The state tuition reduction is a grant that comes to us. Both of those are based off of this 87% of the base ed. There's salary assistance that we get. So we get reimbursed every year for the co-op coordinator, which is an open position right now if anyone's looking for a job and has those skills. Our counselor, my salary and my assistant salary, those are reimbursed partially. So they're either 35% or 50%. And then we do have some businesses. So our automotive program runs a business, our cosmetology program runs a business, and baking and culinary arts run businesses. So all of those programs do bring in some revenue. So there's those total of all those revenues. It doesn't count the time grant, the gear grant, and the Perkins. Those are separate pieces. And then the amount that's left to be raised by the direct tuition back to our sending schools is that $1,885,000. And that's how we figure it out based on your FTEs. And I have that somewhere. Okay. So this year you have 28.5, next year you'll have 29.1 for your 6 semester average. And Montpelier had 41 applicants in our 334 first round. Yeah.
That's higher than usual.
Yeah, a little bit. It used to be like that high when I first got there. And then it dipped for a little bit. It's gone back up. Questions?
Thank you for the presentation. It's really, really excellent. Do we know why? I think you said the 2 state sources are tied to a base amount. And if the state sources are going down, does that mean this base amount went down? Or can you?
The
explain a
base
little bit?
education rate went down. It went down 3.1% from last year.
Do you know anything about that number, what it is or where it comes from?
I can try to explain Brad James's email to us.
Or Brad James emails.
Yeah, it's, what I do know is it's based off of I think it was 2002, and this is memory, so
I'm looking at it right
it
now.
might not be accurate. There was the set amount of 6,000 something, and then there was from there, the amount of like inflation. It's some sort of calculation related to that. But let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, Libby, you could, if it's allowed, you could forward it to me.
Yeah.
Curious about it.
Yeah, did I share it with you? Libby?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Cause I mean, imagine like, that with inflation, those kinds of numbers would just keep growing and wouldn't go down in some year unless there's a policy change, but.
Right.
I just sent him the email.
Okay.
It's probably easier just for them to read.
Yeah, because sometimes when I talk to Brad, I can understand and like ask the questions that help me to be able to explain it to someone else. I haven't had that ability yet. My understanding is he may be coming to the CT directors meeting tomorrow. We meet once a month as a set of directors across the state. And he may be trying to explain it to us there. We prepared a letter to say this is not helping us. If you're supporting CTE, this doesn't support CTE, but we haven't quite figured out what the ask is that won't have further negative. It feels like this has negative impacts on you all too, but we want to make sure whatever we're asking doesn't also add to that. So we're kind of on a holding pattern. So hopefully tomorrow when we meet, we can figure out what it is and move that forward.
It says the NEEP CPI has been re-indexed and EEP CPI.
Yeah, could you send that to me?
I sent it to you, but that's what he reading through it. That's the brief, the brevity. I don't know what the NEEP CPI is.
New England Economic Progress Council.
I knew you would.
Yeah, it comes up in a few places in ed finance,
Okay.
but I didn't know it got re-indexed. That would make it go down.
If I learn more and can share, I will.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there's the possibility of buying land for the new building. Is that where you would say you're at in the process? Most of our community is probably not following on
We
day by
would-
day, minute by minute.
So we've been in site selection for some time, which meant I got to tour lots of interesting properties. We got sort of excited about a few potentials, including a co-location at one of our setting schools, a really beautiful field that we can't build in elsewhere. And we're ready to move forward with an agreement. We're not purchasing land. That would be pending a bond vote. And the bond vote may be November of 25, may be March of 26. That hasn't been decided yet. There's reasons for both, right? November 25 would be the only thing on the ballot. People would be coming out for or against it. We'd get a good understanding of whether there's support or not. But March 26 would allow us to get through this first year of this legislative session and try to see where things are going and what other complex things might happen. So it's simply an agreement with the landowner to hold the land pending that bond vote whenever it happens.
So is there any money in the FY 26 budget for anything having to do with?
I think we level serviced it for the work that we're doing with our architects. So they would, with that agreement in place, would start to design the building more fully so that they could, when we go to bond vote, we would have an actual closer to real cost. Because right now they're just estimated based on this much square foot at this price is what it would cost, but they would actually go into, okay, we're designing it. We're looking at what the actual square footage would be on this specific site. And they would have those prices for when we go to bond vote so that we would have that.
So this budget for FY 26 has no more money in it for.
It
the
doesn't have
project.
any more money in it
Than
for
it did.
architectural than it did for this
Than it
current
did for this year.
fiscal year. Yeah.
And you said that was in Berrytown.
Yes. Which it's interesting because we had site selection criteria that included it must be 25 acres minimum, 3-phase power, paved roads, like sewer and water, and centrally located. And I think the central location feels off.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part. And the members of my board that have been there say, you know what, it actually takes the same amount of time because you don't have to go through Berry City to get to it. So
So it's not any farther, it's just not any closer to some of those further towns.
I'd say it's further if you're looking at mileage for some,
Yeah.
but time-wise, it won't be.
Thanks. By the way, I'm in charge now. Jim had to go. So, any other questions? For Jody?
We like a motion or what do we do?
No, we just get to list it.
Informative.
Yeah, the 18 towns that we have, some of them yours, will vote on our budget. And so that if they approve it, then you must pay it.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then we have to go through a similar process of revoting and going through.
It's a great program. I hope we do.
Up to Washington Central now,
Yes,
so
third one.
drive safe.
3 in 1 night, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Drive safe, Jody.
Thank you.
It's gonna start getting icy out there.
Well, I think they're actually online only. So
Uh-huh.
can I use that room?
We're gonna go into executive session, but
Okay,
I
then
can get
no.
you in a classroom or you can go use my office.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I think that is
Got it.
next, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I forwarded the board, I'm gonna go get Jody into my office. I forwarded the board the 2 motions that need to be made from Anna. So if
Right.
somebody has their computer open. you can-
And so I think we have one that would have regular attendance and one that would not. Of the executive sessions, am I wrong? Oh, no, she's in.
I don't know where you're.
No, we can say both of these and Libby could come with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody want to say 'em?
Of course, I just got kicked out. So we'll do both motions at once? or-
No, I think we
one
do
at a
the
time?
first one and then vote on it,
Okay.
and then the second one and then vote on it.
Okay. I move to find that premature general public knowledge regarding the board's labor relations agreements with employees would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage because the board risks disclosing its negotiation strategy if it discusses the proposed contract terms in public.
Thank you, Jill. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, any discussion about that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next one.
I move to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing labor relations agreements with employees under the provision of Title I, Section 313A1B of Vermont statutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So moved.